All right, so one of the least talked about events in Great Depression history is the March of the Bonus Army. Now, this could show up on your AP exam. It actually did show up on your practice exam. So here's a little introduction. Please be prepared. In 1924, Congress decides to grant every World War I veteran who served a bonus. They believed that these veterans deserved some kind of reward for their service to the nation in such a horrible circumstance as the Great War. Veterans who served overseas would receive $1.25 per day served, and veterans who served stateside would receive $1. Now, the catch was that these bonuses would not be payable until 1945. So in 1924, Congress grants these bonuses during a period in which the economy is thriving and booming and everything's great. And these bonuses would be payable in 1945. So fast forward to 1932. The United States is gripped by a severe economic depression. We're right in the heart of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. And these World War II veterans have reached the point of understanding that many of them won't make it to see 1945, that many will die before they would receive their bonuses. So they asked to get paid a percentage of the bonus promised them in 1924. Hoover refuses, and he argues that to pay these bonuses would bankrupt the country. The economy was already crippled. It certainly couldn't handle the task of maintaining its own services, let alone paying back the millions in bonuses it has promised to these veterans. Veterans begin a call to march on Washington, D.C. Their hope is to go to Washington, D.C. and make the demand for receiving a percentage of the bonus promised to them by the government in 1924. So Walter Waters, a World War I veteran, sends out a call for World War I veterans to gather in Washington, D.C. Sorry about the typo there. We are talking about World War I. Veterans are to migrate to the capital by whatever means necessary, and many of them walk, a few of them drive, hitchhike, and many thousands also hitch on boxcars, hop in boxcars, on top of boxcars, whatever it took to get there. By June of 1932, over 15,000 had gathered in the capital to demand Congress give them their bonuses. Now, when they get to the capital, of course, there's certainly no place to live, but they're granted permission to use two empty fields, one in Washington, D.C., and one across the Potomac River on an area known as the Anacostia Flats. So now we're in June of 1932. Herbert Hoover refuses to meet with the leaders of the Bonus Army, won't even consider it. Now, a congressional delegation does go and meet with the organizers, but in the end, the Senate votes to reject the demands. With nowhere else to go, many of the bonus marchers decide to remain in Washington, D.C. Although several thousand do go home, we're looking at probably somewhere between 5,000 to 7,000 remain in D.C. It's not like they have any place else they can go. And the longer they stay there, the more Congress and the president begin to see them as a threat to national security. There is some talk that maybe the anarchists and the communists have infiltrated the bonus army and maybe causing problems or stirring up trouble. Now, as we know, it's summer and tempers get hot in July. So July 28th, in fear that these bonus marchers might get a little too rowdy, a call goes out by the Washington, D.C. police force to clear the bonus marchers out of the D.C. shantytown. So July 28th, the order goes out to clear the shantytown that is inside the city limits of Washington, D.C. This is the purview of Congress. The D.C. police will fire tear gas, use bayonets, and prod the bonus army out of the D.C. shantytown. Because many of these guys don't have anywhere else to go, they cross the bridge to the Potomac and settle in the Anacostia Flats shantytown. Now, Hoover fears that this is going to create even greater unrest, and he wants to prevent the bonus marchers from coming from the Anacostia shantytown across the Potomac outside D.C. into D.C. to cause problems. And so he orders General Douglas MacArthur to use the military to prevent the bonus marchers from coming into Washington, D.C. Now, there's a lot of confusion here on what the orders were, because Hoover says he said one thing, MacArthur says something else, and the historic record we have is very contradictory. But what ends up happening is that MacArthur, with a regiment of the U.S. Army, moves in and forces the residents of the Anacostia Flats shantytown out. So these bonus marchers are moved out with a force of tanks and tear gas, and in fact, several will die. And to add insult to injury, after MacArthur's cleared the shantytown, he burns it down with all the possessions that the veterans had collected as well. Now, as you can imagine, the American public is horrified by the treatment that these World War II veterans receive at the hands of the U.S. government. Hoover, of course, is arguing and trying to put spin on this. It is an election year, after all, by saying that the bonus army was full of communists and anarchists, and that they were there to destroy the nation. But the public doesn't buy it, and quite frankly, history doesn't bear that out either. The reality was 9 in 10 of the marchers were World War I veterans, and 20% of the bonus army marchers were even disabled veterans at that. The protest and occupation had been mainly peaceful. Problems had been policed within their own ranks. There had been a little unrest, but the violence didn't really start until the police moved in, and then it turned into a bit of a riot. But it came down to the fact that the people were horrified by the way these marchers were treated. These guys were considered as people who had sacrificed so much for our nation, and it will cost Hoover, in large part, the election in 1932, because this happens right before the election. This is July of an election year, and it certainly helps secure the victory for Roosevelt.